Hello everyone and welcome to the Card Combo Show, episode 24, getting ever closer to that fateful episode 25, where I like to look at weird and wonderful combinations in the Final Fantasy TCG. This week we are going to be looking at Chaos from Opus 11, Bartz from Opus 12, the rest of these are all Opus 12 to be fair, Magissa, Althea or Althea, and Krile. If you do like the videos, then make sure to like and subscribe, it makes a big difference. Okay, so Chaos is a 1 CP dark backup with the text, when Chaos enters the field, choose one forward of cost 5 or more in your break zone. When you may pay X. When you do so, if its cost is X, play it onto your field. 3 dull and remove Chaos from the game. Choose one character opponent controls, remove it from the game. So I think Chaos is a slept on card. He has a really good dull ability. The fact that he can remove any character from the game, so that also includes your opponent's backups as well. And there's no stipulation on what he can target. He can target any forward, it can be any backup, any monster. So you know he's a good way to be able to get rid of stuff. But he's also recursion for high costed forwards, which at the moment you're kind of limited to be able to either bring back to your hand using the likes of Kusith and then having to replay them, or if you're on Earth you do have the 7 cost Tama to bring onto the field, but even then that's quite limited. So Chaos has a nice ability to just be able to pay X and then bring it onto the field. So something like Bartz would be quite useful, so you just pay the 1 to bring Chaos into the field, and then you pay a card out of hand and dole 3 backups maybe, to then bring in Bartz, which will allow you to play even more things. Then you got Cloud of Darkness, so it's always good to have an option to just be able to board wipe your opponent. Most people go for the likes of Shantoto, but if you're in water, then Cloud of Darkness is really your only option at the moment. So being able to pay for Chaos to then bring Cloud of Darkness out of your break zone and back onto the field. And this is another great thing about Chaos, is that you get to reuse these options. So they obviously have enter the field abilities that will do you some good, and the fact that they're dead only betters yourself. Opus 11 really introduced how the break zone is almost like a second hand for you to be able to play with, or I guess kind of like a second deck in a weird way. Milling has lost its spice now because of the fact that putting things in the break zone almost helps a lot of decks these days. So yeah, the likes of Chaos really capitalize on this. Lightning. So you pay for Chaos, bring in Lightning. Lightning can dull something when she enters the field. She also has haste, and the great thing about Chaos is it brings it onto the field active. And then, yeah, so Lightning comes in, dulls something, she attacks, you dull something else, and hopefully that'll be enough to deal your opponent a point of damage. Glaive, this is a personal preference really. I ran a Warrior of Darkness deck recently using Chaos. There's a lot of good Final Fantasy Legend cards that cost 5 or more, but Glaive allows you to search. I personally was going for a Diana, which then allows you to get back things like your Albers or Deathlord, and incidentally Deathlord can search the Chaos, which you can then play to then get Glaive, or you know, vice versa. Nail, so really getting some value out of this. It's worth noting obviously you do have to pay a lot for these cards, but the more backups you have when you play Chaos to be able to play other forwards, the better it is. So you dull 1 backup to bring Chaos onto the field, you then dull your remaining, or 2 more, and then 2 cards from hand, sorry, to then get Nail to cycle out some more forwards to your hand, might be worth it. Aegis, so just Aegis obviously when he's on the field he's probably going to die, and Warrior Lights really are gaining the ability to flood the field quickly. But being able to play Chaos and then bring an Aegis onto the field and then play something else from your hand, probably a Faris, which will then lower the cost of your next Warrior of Light, to then play that for cheap. It's just, Chaos really is another foot in the door to be able to get your Warriors of Light to flood the field. Kind of ironic in a weird way. Regis, so picture this, you've got Regis and a couple other forwards in your field, your opponent's maybe on 6 points of damage so they can't afford to take any more, and you just swing with everything, and all your forwards die. That's fine, because then you play Chaos onto the field. That then allows you to bring in Regis, which then allows you to bring in a couple more forwards that will have left this turn, even if Regis didn't leave this turn, you know? I mean, if you've got a couple of forwards that left and they've got enter the field abilities, and Regis is sat in your break zone and waiting to be played, play Chaos. Ultros. So again, I mentioned earlier how a lot of cards these days really look at your break zone as a source of inspiration in a weird way, and Ultros being able to create some seafood soup and just go and ham with his attack. And Opus 12 gave us another Ultros card, which means that this Ultros now has the potential to deal 7 on attack. And obviously, if you've got a lot of Ultroses there, but they're all gone, then be able to play Chaos to bring Ultros back, and then hopefully go swinging your next turn is quite formidable and a problem for your opponent. And Necron. So Necron's a bit of a weird one, but I think this is hilarious because obviously you play Chaos, that's a dark card, you bring in Necron, he gets to make something else dark as well, and then you're only 1 dark card away from being able to deal your opponent a point of damage. Obviously you can play Chaos in your second main phase, so you just play Chaos, bring in Necron, you've got another dark card on the field, you can go to end your turn. If your opponent doesn't have a response to Chaos bringing in Necron, then your opponent's going to take a point of damage, which, you know, that could be the 7th point of damage. But yeah, obviously one of the downsides to Necron is that if you have got a couple of dark cards, and again, it's worth noting, Necron makes these characters become dark, it doesn't end at the end of the turn, so if Necron disappears, those cards remain as dark. But if you lose the ability to have more than 1 dark character on the field, say Necron dies, all those characters that are dark will just poof, go into your break zone. Because it's stated in the comprehensive rules you can't control more than 1 light or dark character on the field at any one time unless an ability states so. So you need to make sure that you've got a few cards there that can create that ability, and obviously old school 2 CP Chaos is one of those cards. But you've also got the likes of Spiritus. Sorry, talk about a brain fart. Yeah, so you've got the likes of Spiritus, which allow you to control more than 1 dark card, and then you've got Necron as well. So, you know, it's good to make sure that you've got plenty of cards on the field that allow you to have more than 1 dark card. But either way, if you've already got, say you've already got Spiritus there sat on your field, you play Chaos to then bring in Necron, you've got 3 dark cards, or dark characters even, your opponent will then take a point of damage. Cool, Bartz. So I really like this card, and he just belongs in a Chocobo deck. But he's got a lot of good other plays as well. But yeah, 4 CP, 8k Warrior of Light. The forwards of cost 1 you control gain haste. When Bartz forms a party and attacks, you may search for 1 forward of cost 1 and play it onto the field. So Palom, whenever I get a chance to put the Wonder Twins in, I will. So yeah, being able to bring in Palom, hopefully your opponent won't be able to block at all, but you attack with Bartz and something else to bring in Palom. Palom can then obviously go swinging, deal your opponent a point of damage, which can then bring in the 3 cost Palom to then set up for the old Comet trick. Snow as well, so this card very rarely gets played, but giving him haste makes him a bit more formidable. The fact that he can just pop into the field, swing, so maybe your opponent's got a forward standing up, but they don't obviously want to block a party with Bartz because it's probably going to kill the forward they're blocking with. But then Snow comes in, he's got haste, attacks, and then dulls the forward out of the way. It's worth noting that this also works well with, you know, just backup Snow. Your party attack with Bartz, it dulls 2 things out of the way, and then when he brings in a little 1 CP forward, that will also dull something else out of the way. Kate Sith, again, more dulling. So Kate Sith enters the field, dulls something out of the way, and goes swinging. Vaan. So this works particularly nice in tandem with Nono, and in fact Nono is just really good for a Bartz style deck because obviously there's lots of party attacks going on, so lots of backup reactivation, but you got a little 1 cost Vaan there, he attacks and you get to reactivate 2 backups, and maybe you can stack it on top of something like Choco Latte to get that second counter you need, and then she reactivates and then you get to draw yourself a card as well. So there's lots of cool combos you can do with these 2. Black Chocobo. So maybe you've attacked with Bartz and something else, and you've got another forward that you'd like to be able to attack with, but you can't. You bring in Black Chocobo. If that forward can party attack with Black Chocobo, it can't be blocked anymore. Pretty cool. Soul. So yeah, it's worth noting that Bartz is a Warrior of Light, and Soul is also a Warrior of Light, and Soul is very good for Warrior Light's decks, but Bartz kind of is as well because of the fact that he gets all the benefits from all the other Warrior Light decks, cards even, sorry. So yeah, being able to bring Soul into the field and he just gains haste regardless of whether or not Bartz is down, but it means there's a bit more continuity between the Warrior Light deck itself, and it means that you can create a much more aggressive Warrior Light deck, especially with the likes of Faris. Jake, so all these forwards, when they come in, you know, they're all pretty small. I mean, what, Sol's 2,000, Black Chocobo 3, Varn 3, Kasith 2, so they're all very, very small. So being able to combo this with the likes of maybe Jake, so when they enter the field they then gain plus 4,000 power, makes it much more difficult for your opponent to have to block if they do have to, or even, you know, just if they want to break it outright, they need to deal a bit more damage to it. Okay, Magissa, a 4 CP 8k fire forward with the text, pay 0, search for 1 fire forward of cost 3, and play it onto the field. You can only use this ability if Magissa has received 4,000 damage or more and only once per turn. So a few things to be of note here is that it says, search for 1 fire forward of cost 3, it's not 3 or less, so it's only 3. She can't bring in the smaller forwards. And obviously you can only use once per turn. 4,000 damage is a weird kind of point to hit. There aren't many cards that deal naturally 4,000 damage, but obviously you can overshoot it a little bit, but you don't want to get Magissa too close to death because then your opponent can just finish her off. But for example, the likes of Blaze is fantastic, another Opus 12 card, but when Blaze enters the field, choose up to 2 forwards, deal them 5,000 damage. Now what I really like about Blaze is that you can choose Magissa as one forward and one of your opponent's forwards as the other. So you deal 5k to that, 5k to Magissa, and then Magissa can bring in something to then finish off that other forward. I mean, let's say it's something like Forza that deals 7 when it enters the field. That is a total of 12,000 damage for playing Blaze onto the field. That's insane. Bomb as well. Bomb's a great card because it deals, well, you make him a forward and put him in the break zone. It deals 4k to all forwards. That includes your all forwards, which includes Magissa, which then means Magissa can play something onto the field. And again, you can combo that with the likes of Forza or anything that deals damage when it enters the field. Now, obviously, as I mentioned, it's unlikely that your opponent's going to be dealing damage to Magissa unless they can kill it. So making sure she has a bit more survivability is great, and she is a fantastic blocker as well, because if you just got her standing there and she's an 8k, maybe you've got LeBro down so she's actually a 9k, and something like Cecil there, to be able to reduce the damage she does takes, it means that if she takes even 1k less than damage she should take, she's going to bring something in, and that's going to be a nightmare for your opponent to have to deal with. And obviously, similarly, you can do something the same with the backup Cecil as well. There's a lot of cards that can reduce damage based on certain abilities, but these are just a few I went to. Forza, so as I mentioned before, obviously these two came out together in the same set and they're obviously meant to be played together, but Forza is just such a stellar card that I felt the need to put him in this video. I mean, you can't cast Forza, which means you can't play him out of your hand effectively, but Magissa can bring him onto the field, Phoenix can bring him onto the field, and he deals 7k when he enters the field, so like I said earlier, if you combine this with the likes of Blaze, it means that you'll be dealing 12k to a forward. That's pretty good. Vivi, again, another great forward. Now, he doesn't deal as much damage as Forza when he enters the field, but, you know, he can also deal a lot more than Forza could. So maybe you've played Blaze to hit Magissa and something else, but Blaze actually killed one forward, while Vivi enters and then kills another forward by dealing it, you know, 8, 9, 10k, depending on how big your opponent's hand is. Palom, so similar to Forza, when he enters the field from any other way but then from your hand, choose something, deal it 7k, and it, again, as I mentioned earlier, water and fire make good bedfellows, so it means that you might have the Comet play online ready to deal your opponent a point of damage as well. Warrior, another Opus 12 card, and a fantastic one at that. So let's say, hypothetically, you paid for the Blaze out of hand, or you had the bomb on the field already, and you've got all your backups open. You put bomb into the break zone, you deal 4k to all your opponent's forwards, and Magissa brings in Warrior. You dial as many backups as you want and deal 3,000 for each backup you dialed. This is such a powerful forward because it's one of the only forwards that can deal, what, naturally 15,000 damage? I mean, yeah, that does effectively mean that the cost of the Warrior has skyrocketed. I mean, that would be an 8 CP forward. I mean, that's only 7k, but to be able to deal such an uncompromising amount of damage, that's really cool. I mean, it's almost like you've got the Manasvin Warmech there to boost his power, but you don't need it. It's increasing it by even more damage. So yeah, I really like this card. And with Magissa, it means that you can deal, well, even if you have to deal 3 backups, it's still 9k to something, which is really good. Alphanord. Yeah, so fire isn't only dealing damage to things, alright guys? As much as you might want to say that, it isn't. And Alphanord's a fantastic card because it gets to search you any one character. And whilst it's not a summon, searching any character can really save you, and it can turn the game for you. It can turn the tide. Lice. So imagine you're on 5-6 points of damage and you just need to be able to survive a bit longer before your opponent decks out. Magissa brings in Lice. Magissa becomes a 10k forward, which means that she's even harder to get rid of and more likely to bring in more forwards. But Lice also herself becomes a 9k forward. If you've got Lebro down, Magissa becomes 11k. That's crazy and so powerful. And again, it's another utility which is awesome to use alongside Magissa. Althea. So, not the most comboable of cards, which might seem weird, why am I featuring it, but I think she's just a standard, genuinely really good card. So when she enters the field, choose one character other than Althea you control, activate it. So she is effectively a 2 CP backup, but the fact that she can choose one character other than Althea you control, return it and Althea to their owner's hands. So she is able to, any character, pop back in your hand, kind of like Windrake from like Opus 2, 3, 4, maybe, no, I think it's 2 or 3, but better, a lot better. So she gets to reactivate a character, which is awesome because it means that you can reactivate your forwards if you need to block with, but it also means that she has a form of protection as well to be able to return herself and it back to your hand. So, Dorgan. Dorgan is a weird card, but quite fun to play if you have a deck featured around him, which a friend of mine does. You know who you are. But yeah, so being able to play Althea, but also being used Althea to be able to bounce other backups to your hand to then replay them, so that Dorgan kind of steals them, and you just keep on playing things until your opponent doesn't have any forwards and they just swing through with Dorgan. So yeah, Mion, being able to Althea Mion back to your hand. You've got 2 cards now that can bounce things, and you just keep on bouncing your backups to then play more, and similarly Yargrosh. These 3 cards are all now part of a great toolkit that work excellently with Dorgan, and as I mentioned earlier, Althea only effectively costs 2 CP because she gets to reactivate something. Lock, so you play her onto the field, she gets to reactivate something, that then reduces the cost of lock, but Althea can also, similarly with Dorgan, you can bounce backups back to your hand, you can play those backups. Obviously you'd only really want to do that if they have entry abilities, but you play a couple more onto the field, that reduces lock's cost, and then you play lock onto the field, or you can just use Althea to bounce lock back to your hand to then replay him, because he has good entry abilities. Chalinka, so it's a bit of not the best combo in the world, but you play Chalinka onto the field, you choose a forward, it can attack twice. You then use Althea to bounce Chalinka and Althea back to hand, you play Chalinka again, and now you can have 2 forwards that can attack twice, which also, strangely enough, means that you can party attack with 2 forwards and they can both attack twice, which is really weird. But if you've got a lot of damage dealing forwards, so maybe you've got an Archangel, so that will deal 2 points of damage when it deals damage to your opponent. If that does that twice, that's 4 points of damage. And then you've got something else that will deal damage, maybe, I forget his name now. Luso. Luso can deal damage when he attacks well. So if you've got a little Yuri there as well, he'll deal a point of damage when he attacks, and it'll happen again with Chalinka. So, you know, lots of fun and games to be had with these 2. Fat Chocobo. Oh my god, the more Chocobo cards that come into the game, the better Fat Chocobo becomes. And especially with the addition of 2 Chocobo backups in Opus 12 means that Fat Chocobo's really going to start earning you some value. But let's say you pay 4, play Fat Chocobo onto the field, and you get 5 Chocobos to hand. Cool. Use Althea to put them back in your hand. Play him again. You get 5 more Chocobos to hand. That's 8 Chocobos you just drew, you know what I mean. And not to mention any cards you might have had sitting in your hand beforehand. Hand, and then just go hammed. Sorry. Shantoto. yeah, sometimes you play Shantoto fairly early on because your opponent's got that aggression, and then it's a bit of a slow build, and all of a sudden, 3 or 4 turns later, you're in the same position again, and you wish you had Shantoto. Now you can have Shantoto again, you don't have to worry about breaking her and then searching out your deck and replaying her, or getting out of the break zone and then replaying her. You can just put her back in your hand, replay her. Job's done. And Krile. So Krile is strange. She is neither a good nor bad card in my opinion. I've seen a lot of people online that give her a lot of stick and a lot of people that really like her. The way I see her is that she is a card of XCP that has any entry ability of summons you or your opponent controls. So, which sounds like a stupid thing to say because it's obvious, but if Krile was a 5 CP forward that said deal 7k to a dull forward your opponent controls and your opponent discards a card, I think people would be like, yeah, you know what, Krile's not a bad card at all. But because she has to play the summon, it makes her a bit more awkward, but I don't think that necessarily makes her bad, because there are ways to be able to play the summons. Now, a few things about Krile first, is that you have to pay the correct CP colour to be able to cast the summon. So if you're in Mono Earth and your opponent's in, say, Fire, you're going to have a lot of trouble trying to play those Fire summons from their break zone. And also with her Dull ability, you have to pay 1 and then cast the summon, or choose a summon and cast it. Which means that technically you are paying 1 CP over the cost of the summon itself. So if you wanted to play something like Glaciolabalus, it means that you're technically paying 4 CP for it rather than 3. But I still think she's a great card, and ultimately you can end up removing your opponent's summons from the game. So, Kusith, imagine she's a 4 CP forward that enters the field and can get you a forward backup from your break zone. I mean, that's just pretty good. Similarly with Exodus, if she was a 3 CP forward that had all of these things on her, so 3000 power, brave, cannot become dull by your opponent's summons abilities, can be returned to its owner's hands, and if your opponent's on 5 points of damage, do it to all your forwards. So again, a really effective and strong combo. Just have Krile come in and all of a sudden, poof, you've got an indomitable field. Amaterasu. So this applies more to having Amaterasu in your break zone ready to be played, because, you know, as I mentioned earlier, that the break zone is becoming more and more like another deck or hand that you can play from, and the good thing about it is that your opponent focuses so much on what you might have in your hand, sometimes they can forget to check your break zone. And so say they play something like Shantoto, and they're like, oh yeah, it's fine, I know he's cast all the Amaterasus, it's fine. They forget that it can be replayed with Krile, or they think that it's just not going to happen because you don't have it in hand. So then use Krile to pay 1 to then cast Amaterasu out of the break zone and stop that from happening. If it's something else like a forward and you can deal it damage as well, even better. So again, Krile is really good for her utility to be able to play other things and stop them from happening. Leviathan, again, more utility, so choose a forward, return to its owner's hand, that's alright, but choose an action ability, cancel its effect, that can be very strong, and then during this turn if a forward you control is dealt damage by summon, the damage is reduced to 0. So again, really, really useful to be able to stop damage from coming at you. Obviously be wary of any coup chaspals your opponent might have, but still, the utility is there and can be very strong. Chaos. So yeah, Chaos can generate CP of any color, sorry. So if you're running Krile, probably run Chaos as well, or at the very least Shantoto, so that you are able to generate CP of any color, so you can steal your opponent's summons. Yuna. Now you may not need to run the likes of Chaos or Shantoto, because the cost required to cast your summons can be paid with CP of any element. So that applies to any casting of any summons. So these blanket effects can mean if you play Krile onto the field and your opponent's got a Glass, but you're actually in Wind Earth, doesn't matter. You can just pay 3 and poof, you just grab that Glass and you're casting on their stuff, and then it's being removed from the game. So that's really useful. And similarly, you also have cost reductions like Unaleska or, again, Yuna. These also apply to the casting of summons in people's break zones. So, obviously you have to pay the cost, but if it's only a 3 CP summon, so something like Glaz again, I really love Glaz, sorry, and you've got a couple of summoners on the field, then you and Leska will reduce it to a 1 CP summon, which is awesome. And this is where this sort of stuff, alongside Krile's dull ability, starts to work in your favour, because even though you're having to pay the 1 CP for Krile's dull ability, if you can reduce the cost of the summons, that's great. And again, Krile being able to play any summon, so if you've got something like Chaos in your backup lineup, to be able to cast any summon and the costs are reduced, like say for example your opponent's got a Diablo, and be able to make that cost 3 to reactivate all your own backups, and maybe break one of their high cost forwards, or just set it to 1 CP. It's there then when Krile starts becoming really effective. Yasmat, so every turn you just reactivate your backups and be like, yeah, I'll just cast a summon out of your break zone just to get rid of it. And even if that's the great thing about her, is that you can still use her to be able to cast things out of your opponent's break zone just to make sure they're gone, because so many decks these days rely on the break zone, as I've mentioned so many times this episode. Cool. There we are, folks. I hope you enjoyed the video. There's a lot of funky combos. I had a lot of fun making this video this week, especially with the likes of Magissa and Krile. They just do some wonky stuff. Opus 12 has given us a lot of strange but cool cards, and unfortunately in the UK at the moment we are in lockdown, so it means we can't do too much playing in person, but I've been doing some games over Zoom and Skype, and you know, it's a lot of fun, and I recommend it to people because at the moment you gotta do what you can. Anyway, stay safe everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.